She told me to stop staring, then invited me closer. The caught glance. The observation platform hummed softly beneath Myra's boots as she adjusted her datapad for the third time in as many minutes. She wasn't actually reading the scrolling information about chlorophyll analogues and bioluminescent proteins. Her attention had drifted, as it had every evening this week, to the figure moving through the twilight forest below. Tavros navigated the singing vines with an ease that made her chest tighten with something between envy and admiration. The plants seemed to welcome him, their soft turquoise glow intensifying as he passed, tendrils reaching out to brush his shoulders like affectionate cats. He wore the simple wrapped clothing of the Verdantian settlements, leaving his arms bare to show the natural patterns that traced his skin, lines that echoed the branching of the very vines around him, glowing faintly with their own inner light. She'd been stationed on this moon for 6 weeks, studying the empathic flora that had made Verdantia famous among xenobotanists. But no amount of scientific training had prepared her for how the sight of this particular guide would distract her from her life's work. "You know," a voice called up, warmth and amusement threading through it. "The plants are down here, not up there." Myra's heart lurched. Tavros stood at the base of her platform, head tilted back, one hand resting casually on a thick vine that pulsed with golden light at his touch. Even from this distance, she could see the knowing smile on his face. "I was just reviewing my notes," she stammered, heat flooding her cheeks. Your notes must be very interesting to make you stare so intently at the same spot for 20 minutes. He paused, and his smile softened into something gentler. "Come down. You can't understand the forest from up there, behind your screens. I should really finish." Myra. The way he said her name, like it was something precious, made her breath catch. "Come walk with me. Let me show you what you've been missing." It was a terrible idea. She had data to compile, reports to file, professional boundaries to maintain. But she found herself saving her work and heading toward the spiral stairs anyway. The forest floor was different than she'd imagined. Softer. The moss beneath her boots gave slightly with each step, and the air tasted of growing things and rain that hadn't fallen yet. Tavros waited at the edge of a path she hadn't noticed from above, where the vines created an archway that shimmered with pearl and aquamarine light. "Nervous?" he asked as she approached. "Should I be?" His laugh was low and genuine. "Only if you're afraid of beautiful things." He extended his hand. "The vines respond to touch and emotion. If you're tense, they'll stay closed. But if you're open..." He trailed off, gesturing to the glowing corridor ahead. Myra hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. His skin was warm, the luminescent patterns smooth under her fingertips. The moment they connected, the archway blazed brighter, vines unfurling like they'd been waiting for exactly this. "See?" Tavros said softly, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "They already like you." They walked together into the singing forest, and with each step, Myra felt the careful walls of her academic distance beginning to crumble. The vines swayed around them, creating patterns of light that seemed to dance to the rhythm of her suddenly racing pulse. "You've been watching me work," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Every day since you arrived," he admitted without shame. "You look at the plants the way most people look at sunsets. Like you're seeing something sacred. And you called me out for staring." He grinned, unrepentant. "I never said I minded." The touching lesson. The singing vines grew denser as they walked deeper into the grove, their bioluminescence painting Tavros's face in shades of amber and jade. Myra tried to focus on the scientific marvel surrounding her, the way the plants seemed to hum with a frequency just below hearing, how they swayed without wind, but her attention kept drifting to the man beside her, to the way his fingers still intertwined loosely with hers. "Here," Tavros said, stopping before a massive vine as thick as her waist. Its surface rippled with slow waves of violet light. "This is a mother vine. One of the oldest in this sector. To really understand Verdantia, you need to feel it, not just observe it." "I've taken samples," Myra said, though her voice sounded uncertain even to herself. "Run analyses on the cellular structures that produce the light." "And what did your analyses tell you about what the light means?" He stepped closer, positioning himself behind her. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, sensed the rise and fall of his breathing. "May I?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. Tarvrosa's hands came to rest gently on her shoulders, then slid down her arms until his palms covered the backs of her hands. Her pulse thundered in her ears. "The plants here don't just produce light," he murmured near her ear, his breath ghosting across her neck. "They respond to what we feel. Every emotion has a signature, a color, a rhythm. You have to open yourself to them." He guided her hands forward until her palms pressed flat against the mothervine's surface. The texture surprised her, not bark-like as she'd expected, but something between warm silk and living muscle. A pulse thrummed beneath her touch, slow and ancient. "Close your eyes," Tarvros instructed. "Stop analyzing. Just feel." It went against every instinct of her training, but Myra let her eyes drift shut. Immediately, the world shifted. The vine's pulse synchronized with her heartbeat, or perhaps hers adjusted to match it. Warmth spread up her arms, and the humming she'd heard earlier seemed to resonate in her bones. "Good," Tarvros said softly, his hand still covering hers, his chest now pressed lightly against her back. "Now, think of something that makes you happy." Images flickered through her mind, Earth's last botanical gardens where she'd fallen in love with plants as a child, the first time she'd seen Vedantia from the shuttle, the smile on Tarvrosa's face when he'd invited her down from her platform. The vine blazed brighter, cascading waves of rose-gold light that spread to the surrounding plants like ripples on water. "Beautiful," Tarvros breathed, and she wasn't sure if he meant the light show or something else. "The plants are celebrating you." Myra opened her eyes to find the entire grove transformed. Every vine, every tendril, every flowering pod glowed with warm, joyful colors. It was more magnificent than any data visualization she'd ever created. "I've never seen them respond like this," she whispered. "They feel what's genuine." His voice had dropped lower, intimate. "You can't fake emotion with them. They know the difference between curiosity and wonder, between interest and what?" She turned her head slightly, found his face closer than she'd realized. "Desire," he finished, his gaze steady on hers. The grove pulsed brighter, the vines seeming to lean toward them. Myra's breath caught as Tarvrosa's hand moved from hers to brush a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Tell me about Earth," he said, though his eyes never left hers. "Why did you really come here?" The change of subject should have felt jarring, but somehow it didn't. "Earth's gardens are dying," she said quietly. "Even in the preserves, we're losing species faster than we can save them. I thought if I could understand how plants here thrive, how they communicate and support each other, maybe I could bring that knowledge home. Maybe I could save something." "That's a heavy burden for one person," says the man who moves through the forest like he's part of it. Tarvrosa's smile turned sad. "I am part of it. That's what your research doesn't show. My people, we're not just living on Vedantia. We're bonded to it, grown from it in ways your instruments can't measure. When you take samples, when you catalog and categorize," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "We feel it. Like you're studying our dreams." Myra pulled back slightly, processing this. "Why didn't anyone tell me? Would you have believed them? Or would you have written it off as superstition?" She wanted to protest, but honesty made her pause. A month ago, she might have done exactly that. "And yet you're teaching me this now. Because you see the forest as alive, not just as data." His hand dropped from her face, but he didn't step away. "And because I've been drawn to you since the first time I saw you arguing with your equipment, swearing at it for not capturing the proper light spectrum. You cared so much about getting it right." Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the vines shivered. The first drops of rain began to fall, warm and heavy. The plant's glow shifted to deeper blues and purples, a storm response pattern. "We should find shelter," Tarvros said, but he didn't move. Neither did Myra. They stood there as the rain intensified, the space between them charged with more than just the approaching storm. His eyes dropped to her lips, and she felt the question in that glance. Then lightning cracked across the sky, and the moment broke. Tarvros grabbed her hand and pulled her running through the grove, both of them laughing breathlessly as the rain soaked through their clothes and the singing vines chimed like bells around them. The revelation in rain. Tavros led her beneath a cluster of massive fronds that curled overhead like a living cathedral. The leaves had sealed themselves against the rain, creating a dry shelter that glowed softly from within, lit by tiny bioluminescent flowers that dotted the underside of each frond like stars. They collapsed onto the soft moss, breathing hard, rain dripping from their hair and clothes. Myra pushed wet strands from her face and caught Tavros watching her with an expression that made heat bloom in her chest despite the cooling rain outside. "This happens often?" she asked, gesturing to the storm. "Every few days. The plants need it." He wrung water from the edge of his shirt, the movement highlighting the lean strength in his arms. "I should have checked the weather patterns before inviting you out. I'm not complaining." The words came out softer than she'd intended, more revealing. The shelter seemed to grow smaller, or perhaps they were simply more aware of each other in the enclosed space. Outside, rain drummed a steady rhythm against the fronds. Inside, the air felt thick with unspoken things. "Can I confess something?" Tavros said, leaning back against a curved root, his luminescent patterns glowing brighter in the dim light. A sign of emotion, Myra now understood. "Please. I've been watching you for more than 6 weeks. I saw you arrive on that first shuttle, looking up at the canopy with such wonder. And I thought," he paused, running a hand through his damp hair. "I thought, here's someone who might actually understand." "Understand what?" "What it means to love something enough to dedicate your life to it, even when it breaks your heart." His gaze found hers. "You talk about Earth's dying gardens the way I think about what could happen here if the wrong people learned our secrets. It's the same grief, just waiting to happen." Myra's throat tightened. She'd spent so long being professional, maintaining her observer's distance, that she'd forgotten how it felt to be truly seen. "Is that why you really brought me here? To warn me away from my research?" "No." He leaned forward, intensity in his eyes. "I brought you here because I've been looking for a reason to talk to you since you arrived, and tonight I finally couldn't help myself. The research, the complications, I knew I should keep my distance. But watching you stare at the forest with such longing." He smiled, self-deprecating. "I'm not that strong." "You've been staring back," Myra said, her pulse quickening. "Every chance I got." The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the rain-soaked forest in stark relief. The flowers above them pulsed in response, creating waves of gentle light that washed over Tavros's face, his neck, the curve of his shoulders. "I'm supposed to leave in 3 months," Myra said, though she wasn't sure why she was bringing it up now. "When my research term ends." "I know. This is complicated." "I know that too." Tavros shifted closer, moving across the moss until only a breath of space separated them. "But I've learned something from living in harmony with this forest. Sometimes the most important things are the ones that scare us most. The plants here, they don't hold back. When they bloom completely, even knowing the flowers only last a season." Myra's hand moved of its own accord, reaching up to trace one of the luminescent lines that curved along his jaw. His skin was warm beneath her fingertips, and the pattern brightened at her touch. "Does it hurt when people harm the plants?" "Yes," he said simply. "Not like physical pain, but like hearing someone you love cry out and not being able to help them." "I would never." "I know. That's why I'm here with you instead of keeping my distance like I should." His hand came up to cover hers, pressing her palm more firmly against his face. "You're careful with living things. I've watched you handle every specimen like it matters. Like it's precious." "Everything alive is precious," Myra whispered. "Yes," Tavros agreed, his eyes searching hers. "Everything." The space between them disappeared. Myra wasn't sure who moved first. Perhaps they both did, drawn together like the vines reaching for light. His lips met hers softly at first, questioning, and she answered by pressing closer, her free hand finding the back of his neck, fingers threading through his damp hair. The kiss deepened, slow and exploratory. He tasted like rain and something sweeter, something she couldn't name. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her against him, and she felt the steady thrum of his heartbeat. Or was it the pulse of the forest itself? Here, with him, the distinction seemed meaningless. Above them, the flowers blazed brilliant white, then cascaded through every color Myra had ever seen and some she hadn't. The vines outside their shelter swayed and chimed, and she realized with a distant part of her mind that the forest was responding to them, celebrating this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Tavros rested his forehead against hers. "I should tell you something else," he murmured. Myra felt drunk on sensation, on the warmth of his hands still on her waist, the gentle glow of the flowers surrounding them. "The settlement elders. They asked me to watch you. To make sure your research wouldn't harm the groves." His voice was quiet, almost pained. "That's how this started. But Myra, everything between us, everything I've felt, it became real so fast I forgot why I was supposed to keep my distance." The words took a moment to penetrate the haze of their kiss. When they did, Myra pulled back, searching his face. "You were spying on me." "Protecting the forest," he corrected gently, but there was shame in his eyes. "But yes." The flowers dimmed slightly, responding to the shift in emotion. Myra's mind raced, trying to reconcile the man who just kissed her with such tenderness with the revelation that he'd been assigned to monitor her. "What else haven't you told me?" "Everything else has been true," Tavros said urgently, his hands still on her waist, as if afraid she'd pull away completely. "My feelings, my reasons for bringing you here tonight, those were all mine. Just mine." The rain continued its steady drumming, and Myra sat in the shelter of living things, held by a man who was both more honest and more complicated than she'd imagined. Her heart ached with confusion and something deeper, something that refused to be dimmed by doubt. "I need to think," she finally said. Tavros nodded and reluctantly let his hands fall away, though his eyes never left her face. "I understand." But as they sat there, waiting for the storm to pass, the vines around them glowing with muted colors, Myra realized that understanding and forgiving were two very different things. The hidden truth. The morning after the storm, Myra threw herself into her work with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. She catalogued samples, ran spectral analyses, and carefully avoided the sections of forest where she knew Tavros guided tours. Her research platform felt like a cage, but it was a safe cage, one where emotions didn't complicate data and kisses didn't leave her questioning everything. 3 days passed before he appeared at the base of her platform again. "Myra." His voice carried the same warmth, but there was uncertainty beneath it now. "Please. Let me explain properly." She should have sent him away. Instead, she found herself descending the stairs once more, her heart betraying her better judgment. They walked in silence through a different grove, one where the vines grew in twisted spirals and the light pulsed in deep crimsons and ambers. The plants seemed subdued, reflecting the tension between them. "The elders have reason to be cautious," Tavros began, his hands shoved into his pockets, a gesture that seemed unnatural for someone usually so fluid in movement. 20 years ago, another research team came. They promised to study and protect. Instead, they tried to harvest the mother vines, to synthesize whatever makes them empathic. They nearly killed an entire grove. Myra's steps faltered. "I never heard about that." "Because my people made sure it was buried. We've been careful about who we allow close ever since." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "When you arrived with your credentials, your passion, your genuine love for plants, the elders were torn. You seemed different, but they couldn't risk being wrong again. So they sent you to watch me." Myra's voice was flat. "To get close to me. They asked me to observe you, yes. To report on your methods, your intentions." Tavros's luminescent patterns flickered, dimming and brightening in waves. Distress, she recognized now. "But getting close to you? That was never part of any assignment. That was me being selfish, me wanting something I knew I shouldn't want. How am I supposed to know what's real?" The question came out more vulnerable than she'd intended. That night in the rain, that kiss, was any of it genuine, or was it just another way to keep tabs on me? Tavros's expression cracked, pain flashing across his features. "Everything between us has been real. Too real. Do you think I wanted this complication? I was supposed to keep my distance, file reports, stay objective. Instead, I find myself thinking about you constantly, making excuses to walk past your platform, lying awake wondering if you feel even a fraction of what I feel when you look at me. The vines around them pulsed brighter, responding to his emotional honesty. Myra wanted to believe him, wanted to close the distance between them and pretend the betrayal didn't matter. But trust, once cracked, wasn't so easily mended. What did you tell them? She asked quietly. In your reports. That you're careful, respectful, that you take only what you need and cause minimal damage, that you see the plants as living beings, not just specimens. He paused. And that I thought they were wrong to suspect you. When did you tell them that last part? After the first week. Long before I ever spoke to you. Tavros took a cautious step closer. Myra, I failed at my assignment the moment I saw how you worked. I was supposed to stay neutral, and instead I became your advocate. She wanted to stay angry, to hold onto her hurt like armor. But standing here, seeing the genuine anguish in his eyes, feeling the forest itself responding to his emotional turmoil, she found her resolve wavering. There's more you need to know, Tavros continued, his voice dropping lower. About my people, about our connection to this place. It's not metaphorical or spiritual in some vague sense. It's physical, biological. We're born from the groves, Myra. Our ancestors found a way to merge their genetic code with the plants. We don't just live in harmony with Vedantia, we're part of it. Myra's scientist mind raced, questions flooding through her. That's not possible. The genetic divergence alone. I know how it sounds. But it's why we glow, why we can sense the plant's responses, why we feel pain when they're harmed. He held out his arm, showing the luminescent patterns that traced his skin. These aren't tattoos or pigmentation. They're chlorophyll-based photophores. Living plant cells integrated into my body. She stared at the patterns with new eyes, her mind reeling. That would make you a human-plant hybrid. An entirely new form of life. Yes. His voice was barely a whisper. And if the wrong people discovered this, if they realized we're not just living among unique plants but that we ourselves are the key to understanding them. They'd never leave you alone, Myra finished, horror dawning. They'd want to study you, harvest samples, replicate the process. Now you understand why the elders are so careful. Why they watch every researcher who comes here. Tavros's hand found hers, tentative. Why I was terrified of telling you, even as I was falling for you. The forest seemed to hold its breath around them. Myra looked down at their joined hands, at the way his luminescent lines brightened where their skin touched, and she realized what he was really saying, that by sharing this secret, he was placing not just his trust but his entire people's safety in her hands. You're right, she said finally. This is complicated. I know. And you should have been honest with me from the start. I know that too. Myra lifted her eyes to his. But I also understand why you weren't. Why you couldn't be. She took a shaky breath. I've been thinking these past few days, replaying everything. And I realized something. You've given me more truth than most people would. You could have kept pretending, kept your secret, kept me at a distance. Instead, you risked everything to be honest with me. Does that mean, Tavros's voice caught with hope, it means I'm still angry. And I'm still hurt. But I also think. She squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of him, the steady pulse that matched the forest around them. I think maybe trust isn't something you have or don't have. Maybe it's something you build, piece by piece, with honesty and time. Relief flooded his features. I'll give you all the honesty and time you need. Good. Myra managed a small smile. Because I have about 1,000 questions about your biology, and also about what exactly this means for my research. I might have some thoughts on that, Tavros said, his own smile returning. What if instead of studying Vedantia's secrets to take back to Earth, you studied them to protect both worlds? What if your research focused on why forced extraction fails, why respect and harmony succeed? A paper on the ethics of xenobotany rather than the exploitation of it, Myra murmured, her mind already spinning with possibilities. It would tank my career. Or redefine it. She looked at him, really looked at him, this man who was also something more, something beautiful and impossible. The anger hadn't fully faded, and the hurt still lingered like bruises. But underneath it all was something stronger, something that had bloomed in the rain and refused to be uprooted by doubt. I need time, she said again, to process all of this, to figure out what I'm going to do. I'll wait, Tavros promised. However long it takes. As they stood there in the crimson grove, hands clasped, the vines began to glow brighter, not with the explosive joy of before, but with something steadier. Something that looked like hope taking root. The choice of connection. 2 weeks later, Myra sat at her workstation, staring at the screen that held her entire career in its glowing text. Her research paper, 6 months of work, ready to submit to the Xenobotanical Review. It detailed extraction techniques, synthesization methods, commercial applications for Vedantia's empathic flora. Everything the academic community wanted. Everything that would harm this world and the people, the beings, who were part of it. Her finger hovered over the delete button. You don't have to do this, Tavros said softly from the doorway. He'd been giving her space, letting her work through her decision alone, but she'd asked him to come tonight. Yes, I do. Myra pressed delete and watched 6 months of data disappear. Then she opened a new file and began typing a different kind of paper. One about symbiosis, about the failure of extraction, about how some mysteries were meant to be protected rather than solved. Tavros crossed the room and settled beside her, reading over her shoulder. This will end your career. Maybe. Or maybe it'll start a new one. She leaned into his warmth, into the steady presence that had become essential to her over these past weeks. I came here thinking I could save Earth's gardens by stealing Vedantia's secrets. But I was wrong. The answer isn't in taking, it's in learning how to listen, how to respect, how to exist in harmony with living things rather than dominating them. You're giving up everything you worked for. No, Myra corrected, turning to face him fully. I'm choosing something better. I'm choosing truth over career advancement. Connection over exploitation. She reached up to trace the luminescent patterns on his face, patterns she now understood were as much plant as human, as much him as the forest itself. I'm choosing you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Tavros's eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for hesitation. He found none. Myra, he breathed her name like a prayer, like a promise. Are you sure? In answer, she kissed him. This kiss was different from the one in the rain, no longer tentative or questioned, but certain, deliberate, full of choice freely made. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and she felt the pulse of him, the living warmth that was both man and forest, both individual and part of something larger. They broke apart only long enough for Myra to save her work and shut down the station. Then Tavros took her hand and led her out into the night forest, where the vines glowed their welcome and the air hummed with possibility. Come with me, he said, guiding her to a part of the forest she'd never seen, deeper, older, where the mother vines grew so thick they formed walls of living light. There's something I want to show you. They walked hand in hand through pathways that shifted and opened before them, the forest itself guiding their steps. The deeper they went, the more Myra felt it, not just the beauty of the place, but its aliveness, its consciousness. It wasn't sentient in a human way, but it was aware, responsive, celebrating their presence with cascades of color. Finally, they emerged into a clearing where a single massive tree grew, its trunk wider than her research platform, its branches reaching up into the sky like arms embracing stars. The entire tree glowed from within, pulsing with slow, ancient rhythms. This is the heart tree, Tavros said reverently. Where my people began, where the first merger happened. Where we come when we need to remember who we are. It's magnificent, Myra whispered, moving closer. The tree's presence felt almost overwhelming, like standing before something divine. Touch it, Tavros encouraged. Let it know you. Myra placed her palm against the bark, and immediately the tree's pulse synchronized with her heartbeat. Warmth flooded through her, and with it came understanding, not in words, but in feeling. She sensed the tree's age, its patience, its deep and abiding love for all the life it sheltered. And she sensed its acceptance of her, its recognition that she came with open hands and an honest heart. Tears streamed down her face. "I understand now," she said. "Why you protect this. Why you die to keep it safe." "We would," Tavros confirmed, moving to stand behind her, his chest against her back, his arms encircling her waist. "But hopefully, with people like you, we won't have to." They stood there in the embrace of the heart tree, wrapped in each other and in light. Slowly, carefully, Myra turned in his arms to face him. His luminescent patterns blazed bright, matching the tree's glow, and she realized she could read them now, could see the love written in every line, the desire, the hope, the complete and utter trust. "I'm going to stay," she said. "Not for 3 more months. Permanently. I'll rewrite my contract, change my research focus. I want to learn everything about this place, about your people, about how to help rather than harm." "You're giving up Earth," Tavros said, though joy blazed in his eyes. "You're home." "Earth stopped feeling like home the moment I saw a forest that loved back." Myra pulled him closer, her hands sliding up his chest, around his neck. "And anyway, I think I've found a new one." His kiss was her answer, deep and consuming, full of promises and possibility. Around them, the heart tree pulsed brighter, and the entire forest seemed to sing. The vines danced, the flowers bloomed in impossible colors, and the air itself felt charged with celebration. When they finally broke apart, breathless and glowing in the reflected light, Tavros rested his forehead against hers. "The elders will want to meet with you officially, to understand your intentions, to discuss how you can help us protect this place." "I look forward to it," Myra said honestly. "I have so much to learn." "We have time," Tavros murmured, his hands tracing patterns on her back that made her shiver. "All the time you need." "Good." She kissed him again, softer this time, savoring the taste of him, the feel of his luminescent lines brightening under her touch. "Because I plan to spend it all right here, learning every secret this forest holds. Starting with you." His answering smile was brilliant. "I should warn you, I'm a very complicated ecosystem." "Perfect," Myra laughed, pulling him down beside her onto the soft moss at the heart tree's base. "I've always preferred complex systems." They lay there together as the night deepened, wrapped in each other and in the living light of the forest. Above them, the heart tree's branches swayed with what might have been contentment, and around them, the vines wove closer, creating a bower that felt like blessing. Myra had come to Vedantia searching for answers to save a dying world. Instead, she'd found a living one, and a love that was rooted in honesty, grown from patience, and blooming into something that would last far longer than any research term. As Tavros's fingers threaded through hers and the forest pulsed its ancient rhythms around them, Myra finally understood what the heart tree had been trying to tell her, that the deepest connections couldn't be studied or synthesized or replicated. They could only be lived, grown between two beings willing to be vulnerable, to trust, to choose each other despite all the complications. "I love you," she whispered into the glowing dark. Tavros's patterns blazed like captured starlight. "I love you too. Welcome home, Myra Chen." And the forest, alive and aware and full of joy, sang them both to sleep in the cradle of its ancient roots, celebrating the newest connection in its endless web of life. Two beings, two worlds, choosing to grow together. The end.